Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word. Yes, we are back for 2019. Finally. It's only been 2 weeks since the last stream and it feels like a month. It's ridiculous. I hope everybody had an absolutely awesome Christmas or holiday period, I think it's fair to say, and an awesome new year as well. I certainly did, just about getting over it. Got quite a bit to go over tonight, actually. Some stuff from Red Bull, another quit threat. Yes, they all seem to be doing it at the moment. Also, a few concerns over the Honda partnership already. I'll get onto that in just a moment. We'll also be talking about Lawrence Stroll's very ambitious targets for Racing Point. And, of course, as a big Schumacher fanboy, we will be talking about the legend himself on the week that was his 50th birthday. How are we all doing in chat? Are we good? Do you have a good Christmas and New Year? I really do hope you did. I'm going to bring Jonty and Dan pretty much straight into this one. I'm going to bring Jonty in, but I think Jonty's literally just arrived, so I might be catching him off guard a little bit here. Good evening, Jonty.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, I got everything ready and kind of forgot to go into the server. So, hello.
There you go. I saw you in chat, so you were obviously hyped for this one. Good to be back for 2019. Do you have a good New Year?
Yeah, great new year. Nice and quiet. Looking forward to an awesome 2019, which is going to be.
It better be. It better be. And good evening to Dan as well. Hello, mate. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well and everyone in chat. It's brilliant to be here. I think this is going to be the perfect start to the 2019 season. And can I just say, Jonty, as well, I was getting a bit scared then for a second. I thought he's not going to join. He's not going to join. It's going to be chaos to start the new year, but we've got there in the end, so it should be a lot of fun.
Yes, that's it. We're away. We're ready to go. It wouldn't be the F1 word without a hitch somewhere. So let's hope Jonty, forgetting to join the server, is the only one tonight. Although, no, not likely. Let's start off then with Red Bull and the latest in, I guess you could say, a long line of quit threats. They're not the only ones. Ferrari have done it. Renault have done it. I think Mercedes have said it as well. So it all seems to stem from 2021 onwards. If they don't like the regulations, they're off, which quite frankly isn't a huge surprise, Jonty. If somebody doesn't like the shape of a sport, they're not going to stick around. So I don't see why these teams feel the need to tell us every other week that they might disappear if they don't like it. But is this all hot air, or should we take it a little bit more seriously than we do Ferrari?
I think we should take it a little bit more seriously than Ferrari, just because Ferrari have been in it so long and they are completely tied into F1. They are one and the same almost. Red Bull haven't been around that long, and they do have other avenues. We've already seen the changes to the hypercar rules for WEC this year gives them a very, very good way in with Valkyrie through Aston Martin, which I'm certain they're racing. And they might be tempted to go and focus on that instead. But it doesn't have as much of a draw as Formula One. Do they want to lose that massive global market?
That's a sexy car, that Valkyrie, isn't it?
Oh, it's very, very special. I can't wait to see what that does around the Nürburgring. I'm calling that's like a 6 minute 20. That car, it's going to be crazy. And if you heard it,
Yeah, it's stunning, and you can completely understand why they're looking at getting that into Le Mans or whatever they want to do with it, into WEC. But I hope they don't. I hope they don't disappear, Dan. I hope they manage to do both. But are you taking this too seriously, or do you think this is just a team saying, well, if we don't get what we want, we're going to throw our toys out the pram and have a little strop, and then you'll beg us to stay, and everything will be fine?
I think that's a good way of putting it. I'm not going to lie. It's a really difficult one because part of me thinks, well, in a way, the amount of money that Red Bull have to spend on Formula One, how much do they get out of it? I'm sure because they're not a car manufacturer, they're an energy drinks company. It's not quite as much as the likes of Ferrari that you just spoke about. But part of me thinks they've been saying this for so long now. Is this a little bit like the Fernando Alonso moaning that we were talking about just at the end of last year? Is it getting a little bit tiring that it's all the time these threats to quit? So, yes, I think it's possible, but it's just a little bit annoying that it seems like all the time at the moment they're making these excuses when really they just need to concentrate on the new season ahead, concentrate on this new partnership with Honda as well, because I think that's going to be a real key thing to whether they stay or if they go.
Well, I'll read the quote. I did do it in last week's rundown, but Helmut Marko says we have an agreement until 2020. As long as there is no engine regulation and no Concord agreement, neither Red Bull nor Honda will make a decision. Again, I don't know why they feel the need to tell us that. That's quite obvious. If they don't know what the sport's going to be like, then they're not going to commit to staying. However, and this is a bit I found interesting, we will certainly not become dependent again as we have in the past when we were begging others and statements and promises were not kept. That, I'm fairly certain, Dan, is a bit of a sideways dig at Mercedes, Ferrari, and Renault.
It sounds like it, doesn't it? It really does sound like it. It's such a tricky position they're in. I mean, they are really an independent team. Yes, you could argue they're a works Honda team now with both Toro Rosso and themselves having the Honda engines, but they're in a very different situation to a lot of the Formula One teams out there. So, that does seem like a bit of a dig to me.
Yeah, you can understand their point of view, though, can't you, Jonty? They don't want to be begging engine manufacturers every other year because they know that Mercedes aren't going to give them, I want to say an up-to-date Mercedes engine, but I reckon you could put last year's Mercedes engine in that Red Bull and it would challenge for the title because we just know what Adrian Newey can do. So they can't be begging every other year for a new engine supply because they know they're not going to get it. So they might have kind of put themselves in a corner with Honda. They've got to get this right.
Yeah, they absolutely have got to get it right. And like you say, they have backed themselves into a corner. With you saying that they could put last year's Mercedes in there and it would still be challenging for the title. The problem is with other teams complaining about not getting the same engines and what have you, they can't do that anymore.
No,
because customer engines have to be the exact same as the works engine. So sort of all the various bickering around the paddock and largely their own, has put Red Bull in this position where that Honda's got to work. Now, I am very optimistic that it's going to work because everything we've heard is approaching it the right way. Build the best engine you can, we'll make the car fit. Which is totally opposite to what McLaren did, and we all know what happened there. But there are those worries.
Yeah, there's concerns, and I think they've got to get it right, and I can't see... This is why, when I did the video last week, I was very much like, they'll not go anywhere. You know, F1 is very lucrative, as it is for Ferrari. It's not the be-all and end-all for Red Bull. They do so much more. I know Ferrari do as well, but, you know, Ferrari, Formula One, it's kind of, you know, big part of their model, isn't it? It's a big part of their business model. But from a business perspective, which is what I wanted to talk about, when you look at Red Bull, they do not strike me as the kind of team that can go a decade without winning a championship before turning around and going, screw this, we'll go try something else, Dan. I think they want to be competitive, which you can completely understand. But a team like Ferrari will always have the history of F1. They'll get their nice little backhander payments from Formula One and Liberty. I've got a feeling they'll be sticking around, so they're not going to rush out the door, whereas Red Bull might turn around one day and just go, you know, I'm bored of this, we're not winning, why bother? Dan. I think Dan's died. We've lost Dan.
Dan's in the waiting bit, but, well, oh no, he's there.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
Did you catch that, mate?
I was trying to listen along as well. You're on about the marketing side of things, did I hear?
Yeah, I was just saying that they're not the kind of team that strike me that they're going to stick around if they're not winning. They're not going to keep driving for third, which is basically no man's land for them at the minute. They want to be winning world championships. So I can see them getting bored and going, do you know what, actually, let's go if it doesn't work with Honda.
Yeah, I think that's a perfectly way of putting it. And sorry, everyone, for that little mistake there. That's my first one of the year, so hopefully that doesn't happen again. But yeah, I think that's the big thing for Red Bull. I really do. Obviously, the whole point of them being in F1 is the marketing side of things. You know, they're not developing road cars, which is, I suppose, an excuse that some teams, I suppose, like Mercedes use. They say, oh, well, it helps develop our road cars, which I suppose it does to a degree. But Red Bull, they're not about that. You know, when it really boils down to it, they're selling energy drinks. And like Jonty said earlier, there's all these other different avenues that Red Bull into, whether it's the skiing they do, cliff diving, all crazy stuff. So Formula One isn't their main focus. So I think if they're not winning races and if this Honda engine deal doesn't go well and they are in that midfield fight, I don't think they will stick around. Although I will say is that, I don't know quite what you've just spoke about, and I don't know if you've covered this yet, but I will say I expect to see them sell off Toro Rosso first before the main team.
Yeah, I think I think I can never say his name. Dietrich is quite keen to get rid of Toro Rosso, and he has been for a while, hasn't he? So I can see that happening. Is there anything you wanted to add on that, Jonty, before I go on to my little tinfoil hat moment?
No, I was going to agree on that. Mateschitz has always been on about, well, not always, but for the last few years, been on about getting rid of Toro Rosso, as you said, and it would be a very, very good way in for Honda. Now, they did drop out originally with money concerns, but that's kind of done with now. 2008 crash, Honda have had a massive resurgence in recent years, so it's a good time for them to get back in as a named manufacturing, works team. So everything's fallen into place on that side, but on the Red Bull side, like we say, we've still got those worries. And what is Mateschitz' plans long term for them? Would he sell off both?
Do you think then if this doesn't work with Red Bull, Honda might just go, well, can we have Toro Rosso? Do you think that's, or if it does work with Red Bull, would they prefer to stay as a manufacturer or a supplier rather than a full manufacturer?
You've got to think that anyone like that would want to be, a proper works team, not just an engine supplier, because they can get so much more out of it with the control they've got over marketing and everything, like Dan was saying.
Yeah. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on because I have to. It's the first one of the year. What intrigues me on this, Jonty, is the sudden change of tact. All we've had for the last 6 months, I would say, is, Honda are so good. Honda are so good. We are going to challenge with them. They are going to be fantastic. No real concerns over reliability. We're testing with Toro Rosso. The world is amazing. Everything's going to be brilliant next year. We can be champions. Fantastic. And then all of a sudden it's, but if it doesn't work out and we don't get what we want, we're going to disappear in 2021. What that says to me, and yes, I am probably reading way too much into it, but what that says to me, Jonty, is that they've got hold of that engine, put it in the car and found something and gone,
Possibly. It could certainly mean that. But could it also be playing the games early because they're onto a winner? They've got something very right and they know they're going to be challenging. So they're putting this stuff out in the public forum for the other teams to see, to make Mercedes and Ferrari relax a little bit.
A little bit like Mercedes when they're going, we've got off on the wrong foot with this one.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'm going to expand on that because some stuff came out yesterday, and again, pinch of salt because it's come from Auto Bild, so, reports in Germany. Apparently there are some problems with this Honda engine. It's not able to run at full capacity due to, quote, strong vibrations in the ICE, and they've had to draft in Mario Ilion to try and solve the problem, but no solution has been found yet. And Marco told Auto Bild, for this issue, we are taking appropriate measures, but then he did reiterate Red Bull's confidence in the steps forward taken by Honda, adding, where's that quote? There it is. Honda has already overtaken Renault and will be even better in 2019. Then Max has everything together to make it. He is improving all the time. There seems to be no limit for him, and it should also be worth mentioning as well that apparently, I believe Honda and AVL, I think it is, have split up effectively. They were collaborating together with simulation and testing company AVL, and it just ended up in a disagreement and they fell out. I think AVL also worked with Ferrari. I should have kept that article open really, but I think they also worked with Ferrari. So things not exactly rosy at the moment, Dan, or not as rosy as we believe they were going to be. But, Marco there still talking up their chances.
Yeah, I think even if this goes terribly wrong, this first season with Honda, a little bit like it was at McLaren, although that was a completely different kettle of fish altogether in the end. But I think the very first season, you can't really look at too much. It's an embedding season. It's a learning season. Yes, they've had a year with Toro Rosso, but still it's that step up from, okay, Toro Rosso can get away with a poor reliability year and maybe fight and scrap for a few points in the midfield. But Red Bull this year, can they expect to win the championship? I know there's been, and we've spoken many a time, and if we're going to be up in that top title fight, our Red Bull, but I don't really see that happening. So I think they've just got to be able to stay as that third best team. So I don't think there's going to be any major expectations to go forward. I think it's just if they can stay level pegging with Renault. And like you say they're obviously really trying to hype that up. I am just not too sure about that. I'm a little bit more skeptical, but I suppose we spoke about it seems like for the entirety we've been streaming today, the marketing side of things, they've got to be seen as being positive about this venture with Honda. So I suppose we'll have to wait and see. But judging off the Toro Rosso's pace last year, it looks okay. But I mean, we always are just going to have to wait till Spain, aren't we, and see how it goes in testing.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you reckon to all that, John T? I mean, vibrations doesn't... I'm not a mechanic. I'm not the most technically minded, but vibrations don't sound like the biggest issue to try and solve.
That's because they're not. I was going to say, Matty Dash has already mentioned it in the chat. Vibrations are one of the easiest things to fix because you just get things on the lathe or various balancing machines like you get with your road tires. They go on, it measures where the imbalance is through the vibrations, and you can add or subtract weight from that. It's a very, very easy fix. So I do think that's a lot of pre-sandbagging, as you would call it.
Yeah, I can believe that. But we've kind of touched on it a little bit. Two questions I want to put to both of you, really, and to chat as well. The first one is, and I think we have pretty much covered this, but I'll go for it anyway because it's on my notes. But is this Honda's last chance? Not Red Bull's last chance, but is this Honda's last chance to get it right? I think we're kind of in agreement, aren't we, Dan, that it really is, that they've got to nail it this time, because I can't see another team, say, for argument's sake, a Racing Point or a Haas, taking or picking up Honda engines if they failed with McLaren and failed with Red Bull, because they're two of the biggest and best when it comes to finances in F1.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. It'd be crazy. The only time I can see it is if maybe a team like Racing Point really does struggle under Stroll's leadership. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later on, that team, but if they really do fall from grace and maybe at the back of the grid, maybe a Williams situation, and they really are in a dire situation and will do anything, maybe. But even then, I think that would be a crazy risk. And I think they probably would prefer to have a maybe more reliable old Ferrari or Mercedes engine.
Yeah, I think Williams is a good shout in some respects, but I'm just thinking they're not the best financially. They clearly, maybe things will be different in 2019, but they clearly have some kind of problem building a decent car. Do they really then want the problems of, or potential problems of, a Honda engine over the guaranteed reliability and power of a Mercedes one? Do they really want to sort of add that to their problems? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. It is a huge risk, and I do agree with you. I think no one should do it, but maybe it's a difficult one. But if I was going to put money on it, I'd say there's no way anyone's really going to take that risk if it fails like it did at McLaren at Red Bull.
What do you think about that, Jonty? Could you see somebody picking them up if it all fails?
Well, people would be crazy not to. Going back to 2018, the various people that were looking to get in with Force Indias, the Strolls got it, but you had there was talk of a consortium involved with Perez over in Mexico. You got the Mazepins, an outfit like Red Bull. And surely any race team would just jump in on that because it's already successful. Maybe someone like I mentioned before, Carlin. That's an easy way into the top flight.
Yeah. The other one I kind of wanted to... But again, we've kind of sort of covered it, but I do want to ask the question. Coming to you first, John T. If this all goes wrong, where do Red Bull go? Is that it? Is this their... we've kind of already talked about this as well, but it's their last chance because Mercedes aren't going to give them an engine. I can't see Ferrari giving them one, and I can't see Renault going, yeah, go on, come back in, lads, because they weren't exactly the best of friends anyway in the end, and they've not said particularly nice things since they split. So this kind of Honda have got to get it right, and Red Bull have got to get it right.
Yeah, they really have. Out of the remaining ones, the only one I could possibly see would be Ferrari. Purely because they have got some ties in the past when they were supplying Toro Rosso. But with that being sort of an Italian-based team, there might be a little bit of friendliness there, which wouldn't be for an Austrian-based team.
Yeah, and because the problem we've got, and that Red Bull are going to have if this doesn't work, is that as far as we understand at the moment, there are no manufacturers or engine suppliers willing to come in 2021 if these rules don't get completely reset when it comes to the power units, and it doesn't look like they're going to. So Aston Martin, they saw the initial draft of the the rules for 2021 and went, oh, yes, please, we'll do that. And then they changed and they said, no, Porsche don't seem to be overly interested. So I don't think Cosworth are planning on coming back anytime soon. So it's going to be, I think they have said, haven't they, in the past, look, 2023, 24, they might be able to reset these power unit rules. But until then, we're not going to get another manufacturer. So it'll either be a case of Red Bull are going to have to grin and bear it if Honda are struggling, go back to Renault with the tail between the legs, plead with somebody to give them an engine, or they're just going to have to disappear and maybe come back in the future, because I don't see any manufacturers in 2021. I think we'd know by now, to be honest, Jonty. I'm not being quite negative for the start of the year, but I'm not convinced that we're going to see another engine manufacturer or even a new team.
Unfortunately, it does seem the case, because you have to look at the global markets. There are lots of these big names that, whilst they are enormous companies with huge revenues, they have got some of them have got very, very big payouts happening, which is stifling what they can branch out into. And motorsport will always be the first thing to get cut off. As been mentioned in the chat, you've got VW Group are suffering from Dieselgate. Toyota are still paying for all the issues that were with the Yaris brakes about 10 years ago, maybe Corolla. That was a massive recall of sort of 3-4 million cars, costing them a couple of billion. Those are ones that we know of. There could be other stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. We could discuss this all night, because there's so many ways we could go with it. Possible people coming in. Dylan in chat there saying BMW maybe. It'd be fantastic to see. I think they're pretty focused on their other motorsport ventures. I'm not going to say it. But very quickly, I'll come to you first, Dan. Do you think Red Bull will be racing in F1 in 2021?
Yes. I'll start the year off positively. I'll say yes, we will see them on the grid in 2021.
Jonty?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I don't think they'll go in it. They might go long term. They might decide to disappear, but I don't think they'll go anywhere anytime soon. Very quickly, before we move on, I just want to say that the channel has had a bit of a surge over the last week. Thanks partly because of the big video views we got last week on the rundown, and also because of the stream we were on in midweek with Chainbear. Awesome stream, really enjoyed that. So thanks to everybody that came along for that one. But I do just want to point you all in the direction of blackwolfnation.com. They are the F1 Word partners and do a lot to support me and the channel, so huge shout out to them. Happy New Year, guys. Hope you had a good one. And if you're interested in trying something new for 2019, check out their website by following the link in the description down below. And if you find something you like, you can use the discount code F1Word at checkout for 15% off your order. You'll be helping to support the channel and grabbing yourself something awesome in the process. So very much a win-win. But like I say, Happy New Year to you guys over at Black Wolf. It was a pleasure working with you last year, and hopefully we have an awesome 2019 as well. But we're going to talk about Force India now. They're not Force India, Sean. Stop calling it. I've even named it Force India slides in my blooming Streamlabs thing. Racing Point. Move on, Sean. Get with the times. Lawrence Stroll has set some very ambitious targets, Dan. He said short term, we want to stay fighting where we are, which isn't particularly ambitious. Medium term, we want to try and fight for third instead of fourth. Long term, when all the rules change, hopefully we will be one of the greatest teams in the paddock. I mean, wow, that's some 2021 ambition for you right there.
Well, we know he's got money, so I think he's got plenty of that to throw around at this project, but blimey, that's a huge statement he's making there. First of all, that's brilliant for Formula One that he's being so ambitious. Proves that this isn't just a short-term sort of hobby on the side. He really cares about Formula One, and I know there's plenty of criticism about certain drivers he has in his team for next season, but I think it's a brilliant thing. I really do, and maybe it's slightly unrealistic. And when he says he wants to be a top team when all the rules changes, I would like to think he's not crazy enough to think that's 2021. I'd like to think he doesn't expect his team to make that big a jump, especially looking at the progress of Renault. I think that's going to be the biggest issue for them, beating the likes of Renault that are improving. McLaren, I expect to go in front of them over the next couple of years. And then we've seen Red Bull struggle to make the jump up to Ferrari and Mercedes. How do we expect Force India, one of the smaller teams on the grid at the moment, you expect them to expand, but still expecting them to make that big step up is going to be difficult. So, like I say, I want to be hopeful. And I want to say when there's a big reset of the rules, they can expand the team massively and maybe get their own manufacturer in as a partner, then yeah, it's possible. But I would unfortunately have to say it's a little bit unlikely at the moment.
Yeah, see, they're Jordan. You know, their roots come from Jordan, and we know they always punched above their weight. Force India did as well, and I think Racing Point will. But top three, I know we've had rules resets in the past, 2009. We've seen big teams get it wrong. We saw it in 2014. Big teams get it wrong and other teams get it right and make the jump forward. Brawn, Mercedes, which are the same team. Oh, yeah. Just moment there in my mind. But yeah, I think they get it right, so somebody's got to get it wrong, but they're relying on either a Ferrari, a Mercedes, or a Red Bull getting it completely wrong, as well as a Renault possibly, for them to make that jump to third in the constructors. I'm not going to say it's impossible, Jonty, because as we saw with Jordan in 99, I think until he pulled over to retire in the Nürburgring, Heinz Howard Frentzen was an outsider for the title. So a very big outsider, but still an outsider for the title. So if Jordan can do it with their budget, then possibly Racing Point can do it with a bigger budget.
Well, it's certainly possible. We've seen an injection of cash give massive results for people. We were just talking about Red Bull. When that big influx of cash came from the Jaguar days, when they changed into Red Bull, and obviously bringing UA on board helped, they were suddenly getting very quickly. So that could certainly happen with Force India. I don't know if they'll be sort of title contenders as soon as he thinks, but there's definitely nothing to say that it can't.
I say, you never know, do you? He's saying 2021 and we're going, I think that's a bit ambitious, mate. But Brawn didn't even exist they did, but didn't really exist as a team until December, maybe January of 2009, and then they went on and won the title. So if they nail the chassis and they've still got one of the best engines on the grid in the back of that car, they could compete. It's not impossible. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. But even if they manage to, let's say 2021, huge rules reset, they nail the chassis, the Mercedes engine is good enough to keep them competing at the front, they end up as the fastest car right out of the traps after winter testing. Red Bull, Ferrari, and Mercedes, probably Renault as well, even with Stroll's budget behind Racing Point, they're going to have a hell of a lot more money than they will, and they're going to develop maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 times faster than they are. So by mid-season, Force India would probably end up being 4th or 5th fastest anyway, or Racing Point. Stop saying Force India, Sean. So I don't think it's impossible, but I think a lot of cards will have to fall their way, if I'm being honest, Dan. I know there's probably some Racing Point fans now that hate me and really want me to say that, yes, they will challenge in 2021, but a lot of things would have to go their way for that to happen.
Yeah, I think tying into what we just spoke about, I think this optimism maybe is coming from the hope that a Red Bull might drop out, and maybe a smaller team will take their place. Maybe a Mercedes will push their efforts into a different series, something like that. So I think that's maybe the only real chance they have, because like you say, a development war, I think they'd really struggle unless they could get their own manufacturer partner. But even then, we just spoke about it again, it's not looking like the best time in Formula One for new partners and new teams coming on board. So it's going to be a difficult one. Whether they could eventually say, if a Red Bull or if a Mercedes did leave, then join up that sort of way, and say if Red Bull left, maybe they could sign an Adrian Newey that way. So maybe something like that, but it still looks very improbable, unfortunately, which isn't nice to say. Sorry, Racing Point fans, I'll get the name right. But yeah, it's not looking likely, I'm afraid.
It is great to hear that ambition, though, isn't it, from them?
Yeah, it's nice. And it's a nice change of pace, I think. I mean, we hear all the time that McLaren, we'd like to maybe be up at the front. Williams, a bit of doom and gloom. So it's nice that there's a bit of positivity somewhere.
Definitely. The reason I wanted to cover this story is not just because of how ambitious those plans are, but also because of just the whole quote. I'm not going to read it all, but he was asked about why he decided to come in. Did he actually want to buy an F1 team? He says he wasn't even looking at buying a Formula 1 team, and then said, I looked at it as a business opportunity, coupling that with spending time speaking to F1 to understand their vision from 2021, which is some sort of budget cap and some sort of a better revenue distribution to the smaller teams. I've been around the sport for 30 years. There's only 10 teams, and if you look at the value of the franchise, whether it be NFL, UK rugby or football, the value of an asset like this, treated properly, cherished over time, significantly appreciates. I said this in the summer, Jonty, and I think you agreed then, and I'm going to say it again. The more Lawrence Stroll talks, and forget about his son, but the more Lawrence Stroll talks, the more I like him and the more I almost trust him with Racing Point.
Yeah, he's saying all the right things to the right people. I think he is approaching it from the right way because he's putting the money in, but he's not stepping in as a team principal. And that is the right way to do it. That's certainly something that Mario got wrong, in my opinion. He's coming in, he's taking care of the business administration side and letting an actual experienced team principal get on with that side of things. That's a big positive.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Keeping the money and the running of the team day to day separate is a very good thing, because then at least you've not got what's the phrase, a conflict of interest, if that makes sense. You're not Otmar Safanow will care about the finances of the team, but ultimately it's not his money. He can focus on the day to day running, whereas Lawrence Stroll can go, whoa, what are you spending my money on? Stop it, that kind of thing. So I think that's a really good point. But I think it's more that he seems like a proper racer, Lawrence Stroll, and I didn't realise that before he bought Racing Point. I knew Lawrence Stroll because his son was Lance Stroll. That sounds awful, doesn't it? But he sounds like a real racer and kind of knows what he's talking about. But he's a rich guy and he's got to know what he's talking about to get where he is. But I think people see there is a lot of hate aimed towards Lawrence Stroll, but I think that's less to do with him and more to do with his son, which I think is wrong. I think it's really harsh. But I think, I quite like him. Maybe in the minority, Dan. What do you reckon? Do you like what he's saying, or is this just business spiel to pull in all the sponsors?
A bit of both, because I think it is business spiel, but at the same time, I like him. So it's a bit of a mix. But yeah, I think there is a bit of a stigma around the two Strolls. I think, okay, when Lance Stroll first got his seat in Formula One, maybe he wasn't quite ready. I think he's proved himself to be a solid driver, and I think he'll only get better this year. But yeah, I think, like you say there, he really does love his racing. And I remember the first time I'd ever really, obviously, I, like you say, knew he funded his son to race, but at that podium ceremony in Azerbaijan when Lance Stroll got on the podium, that was the first time I saw him. And he really did seem to care about his racing then. And his son, the fact that he was on the podium, it really meant something rather than just cash in the bank that Williams were on the podium. So the fact that we've got people like him trying to invest in F1, I think that should be praised and had more of a positive stigma around it rather than people saying, oh, we don't want your money in Formula One. Leave us alone. We'd rather have a manufacturer. No, that's how I feel about it.
You're right, Dan.
Yeah, I like the Strolls.
I think, people will take shots about Lance Stroll and his money, and they'll take shots about Lawrence Stroll, but you could argue Williams would have struggled without Lance Stroll's money, and we would have lost potentially Force India as they were then without Perez's intervention and Stroll's money. So, we can dislike them all we want, and I've always said this about pay drivers. Obviously, we would prefer to have a grid full of the best drivers in the world, but at the end of the day, and, maybe you'll disagree, John, I don't know, but at the end of the day, it's better to have a grid full of teams, 10, 11, 12 teams. And if that means that pay drivers have to be there to sustain those teams, they serve a purpose, don't they? It's not just about paying for that seat. They're also keeping a team afloat.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to think wider than just what the racing is. These are people's jobs. These are people's livelihoods. That's why it was such a great thing when Force India was saved, because that's not just the 2 extra cars on grid. That's 400 people back at the factory who get to carry on eating. There's a lot more to it than just what we can see on the track. And sadly, that's something that's often forgotten by the people who are ranting and raving about pay drivers.
Yeah, Red G in chat says pay drivers are a necessary evil. They always have been. That's a great way of putting it. Like DRS, it's a necessary evil. We don't particularly love it, but it's there, and it keeps teams afloat. Not DRS, obviously. The pay drivers do, but even the term pay drivers, I've always said drivers have got to have some sort of pedigree. None of us three. Maybe Dan will think he can because he thinks Grosjean's a good driver, so first one of the year. But none of us could rock up with $50 million if we had it and say, oh, we'll have that seat, please. You've got to have been racing, you've got to have had some pedigree. But very quickly, what are we expecting from Racing Point 2019-wise? Do you think they can take that fight to Renault, Jonty, for best of the rest, or is it's just going to be so tight in that midfield, isn't it? We just can't really guess.
They're definitely going to be slugging it out with Renault for most of the year, but I don't think they'll be making any dramatic pushes in 2019. They'll sort of stay where they are, maybe get a little bit quicker, but they'll just be consolidating the team and making sure everything's all in place and all of their systems and how they do everything is spot on, ready probably for 2021.
Yeah, of course. Maybe they might be a bit behind at the start of 2019 because all that uncertainty in the summer led to upgrades and development having to stop while they were waiting to find out money. So they might be a little bit behind when we get to Australia, but we shall see. What do you reckon, Dan? Do you think they can compete next year? Obviously not for the title. That would be a big surprise, but...
That would be a big surprise. That'd be a brilliant season, wouldn't it? It'd be like Jonty's predictions, a little bit crazy. But I'd like to think that I'd like to be positive and say they'll be where they were this year. But I think if I'm being realistic, I think they'll slip back a little bit further behind Renault and maybe be more in a fight with McLaren and the Haas is a little bit further away. So I think they'll be about 6th or 7th in the championship. But I think all the craziness that went on this summer definitely won't help for next year.
I'm going to get you both hyped, and I want to get chat hyped now because I'm ridiculously excited. 12th of February, Renault launched their car. 13th of February, Racing Point launched theirs. 14th of February, I'm grinning, you can hear it, McLaren launched theirs. And 15th, Ferrari launched theirs. 5 weeks, Jonty, not long. And then testing straight afterwards, pretty much.
Yeah, exactly. The good thing is that my partner's birthday is on the 11th, so I've just booked that week off.
There you go. There you go. Even better. I can't wait. Can't wait. Yes. What am I going to do? I think... Actually, tell you what I'm going to do before I get to Schumacher, because I do want to do this. I've been umming and ahhing. Niki Lauda has returned to hospital in Vienna after he contracted a flu infection during a family holiday in Ibiza. Now, first of all, Niki Lauda in Ibiza, I want to see that. But according to Autosport, it is believed that the move was purely a precautionary measure, given his sensitivity to infection following his recent lung operation, and there is no cause for alarm. But still, I just want to wish him all the best and a speedy recovery. He's made of strong stuff, isn't he, Jonty?
Oh yeah, it's not something I like to think about because I don't think you could ever die from anything. He had his last rites read to him twice in '76 and still went on to carry on fighting to the end of the season. It's insanely strong guy, and let's hope he gets better.
Definitely, I'm sure. In Ibiza, there's a stigma around Ibiza, but Niki Lauda there, I could just imagine it'd be brilliant. But let's talk about Michael Schumacher. Obviously, his family released... I want to say an update. They're calling it an update. I'm going to read the quote for you. They said, you can be sure that he is in the very best of hands and that we are doing everything humanly possible to help him. Please understand if we are following Michael's wishes and keep such a sensitive subject as health, as it has always been, in privacy. At the same time, we say thank you very much for your friendship and wish you a healthy and happy year in 2019. We are very happy to celebrate Michael's 50th birthday tomorrow together with you, and thank you from the bottom of our hearts that we can do this together. And then they said Michael can be proud of what he has achieved, and so are we. We want to remember and celebrate his victories, his records, and his jubilation. And that is what we're going to do, and have a little bit of a reminisce about our memories of Michael Schumacher. Obviously, I'm a ridiculous Schumacher fanboy. Yeah. Absolutely. Watching him growing up, he was my hero, still is one of my heroes, not just in Formula One, but everywhere. Love the guy, think he was fantastic. Yeah, okay. There are some other things I'm sure we're going to talk about, cheeky things. But yeah, I just keep fighting, Michael, is what I keep saying, because I'd love a proper update. I would love a proper update, but at the same time, I completely understand the family's decision to keep it all private. But he's an absolute legend. And I mean, statistically, Dan, he is still the greatest driver of all time. Obviously, some debate over whether he's the greatest of all time. I can't compare eras because it's just impossible, because he raced in a completely different time to a completely different formula to those that were racing in the 50s, the 60s and the 70s. But he's right up there, and he's a fantastic driver. But I know you're a bit younger than me and Jonty, which makes me feel like 95, by the way, when you get talking sometimes. But what do you remember of him as Mercedes days? Because I'd imagine that's when you remember the most of him.
Well, I was going to say that's the only racing I've seen. Sorry if that makes you feel old. Yeah, I've only seen the return of Michael Schumacher, which I know he wasn't quite as on the ball as he was in his previous spells in Formula One, as we all know. But still seeing things like that Monaco pole position, that podium in Valencia, he still was a very special driver. And I will say this week, the official Formula One stuff have been pumping out loads of content to do with Michael Schumacher, which I think is really nice of Liberty, because I think younger fans like myself, Schumacher, like you say, isn't necessarily a name that crops up when you talk about the best drivers of all time, when really he should be. You know, he's won the most world titles for a reason. And yes, he was in some dominant cars, but he still had to get himself in those right positions. And some seasons, like I say, I wasn't, a crazy Formula One fan when I was 2 years old, unfortunately. But in the Benetton days, I'm sure he still had to fight for those victories. So I think it's great to see that now it finally is starting to be talked about a lot more, that this guy was something special. And I am a little bit gutted that I didn't get to see him in his classic Ferrari days, but he still is a legend. And yeah, I'll big him up for you there, mate, because he is something special and should be celebrated more in Formula One.
Absolutely. There's a lot of banter out there about Michael Schumacher, but I think most people with a brain and a pair of eyes can see that he's a bloody fantastic racing driver and should be right up there as one of, if not the greatest of all time. Your memories of Schumacher, John, to yours go back a little bit further than mine, only a little bit, not too far.
Well, yeah, mine go back to the very beginning. I watched his first appearance. It wasn't massively successful thanks to the car, unfortunately, but he showed his prowess right from the off. First competitive session of any kind, and he puts a very underpowered Jordan seventh on the grid. It was incredible, and it shows that talent was recognised immediately, because I think it might have actually been asked before the race was over, because he didn't get to do any more than a couple of laps because of the engine going. I'm not even think he started. But Benetton were on the phone to him saying, "Do you want to drive?" It was amazing.
He just flew straight. He was there, wasn't he? And I think it's not just on track, though. I know we are going to talk about the other side of him in a moment, because I'm probably going to moan and be a bit fanboyish about it. But it wasn't just on track. He managed to turn the fortunes around of two teams, definitely. And if you listen to what Toto Wolff has said this week, possibly three. Toto Wolff has said he played his part in getting Mercedes to where they are now. Now, obviously, that's upset Lewis Hamilton fanboys, because they're going, oh, once again taking away the credit from Lewis. And it's like, no, just because a tweet doesn't mention Lewis Hamilton doesn't mean that people are hating on him. The fact is, Michael Schumacher, with his experience, will have had a big hand to play, and his experience working with Ross Brawn in helping Mercedes to develop for 2014. So, I think you could easily argue that he's turned the fortunes around of three teams. Benetton, Ferrari, who were, let's be honest, Jonty, as I remember, nowhere until maybe 96. God, that car was awful. But probably 97. And even then, I would say that he was punching above his weight then. Ferrari were a long way off the dominant times then, even though it was only 3 or 4 years away.
Oh, no, absolutely. The Ferrari in 96 and 97, and even to some degree in 98, wasn't a good car. 96, it was a complete dog, and he still dragged it to incredible results. And you have to believe that the dominance of Mercedes did come from the working between Brawn and Michael, because they did it before. You've got the cold hard evidence right there. Schumacher and Brawn at Ferrari turned the team around, and then went on to be to dominant championships year after year. And he had 3 years at Mercedes and did the same thing. You can't argue that he was influential and instrumental in making that team so good.
Yeah, he has to have played a part. I mean, people say, Dan, he's only as good as his car, but, who isn't? Really, that's such a flippant question there, but who isn't? Would Lewis Hamilton be driving a Williams to the World Championship last year? No. He needs to have a good car, doesn't he? So people will say that, and I'll always defend Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel, Michael Schumacher, any world champion on that. You have to have one of, if not the best car to challenge for the world title. Of course, unless, as some people seem to think, Narain Karthikeyan won multiple world titles with HRT, didn't he? No.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's 100% the case. And I remember, something a little bit more in my time that I can remember, Sebastian Vettel, When he was winning the championship every year, everyone was saying, "Oh, he's an awful driver. Why is everyone saying he's so good? He's only winning the championships because of the car." And now he's gone to Ferrari. I know this season was a bit of a blip, I suppose, but I think people are really starting to now see that Vettel is a solid driver, does deserve multiple world championships. I imagine some people in the comments aren't too happy about that. So sorry, chat. But yeah, I think you're right. And he was, like I say, one of the best of all time. But like you say, Hamilton, if he was in I suppose, a Red Bull, this year's Red Bull, would he be winning the world championship? Most likely not. So you got to be in the right place at the right time. And he did fight against some incredible drivers, Mika Hakkinen, Fernando Alonso. These aren't rookies of the sport. So it wasn't as if it was plain sailing every single year. So yeah, he definitely is a special driver.
I think Mika Hakkinen, but I saw a thing on I think on YouTube, F1 YouTube, asking about his greatest rivals or going over his greatest rivals. I think Hakkinen was Schumacher's greatest rival. I really do. I think not just Hakkinen was so underrated. And obviously I hated him at the time because he was beating Michael Schumacher to world championships. So I didn't like him at the time. But looking back, he was so underrated, Mika Hakkinen. And he drove so hard and pushed Michael Schumacher to the limit to the point where Schumacher said he was the one driver he feared in terms of his speed. And the respect there as well for two great rivals was phenomenal. But what do you reckon, Jonty? I would say Mika Hakkinen, greatest rival.
Yes, or his most talented rival. I mean, it's very hard to argue against the fact that he had his most bitter and intense rivalry against Damon Hill for obvious reasons, and possibly even Villeneuve, which didn't really go his way. But for the quality of the driver he was against, where he really had to show what he was made of, Hakkinen is definitely at the top of that. Hakkinen's one of the most underrated drivers of all time, even though people do rate him because he's got 2 world titles. But he never seems to come up in those greatest conversations, which is just wrong.
He did some special stuff, did Hakkinen. Maybe we'll talk about him another day, though. But there is another side to Michael Schumacher. I've seen people in chat, and it's a word that winds me up. And Dan knows it. That's why he always banters me with it. But the word cheat. I would never label Michael Schumacher a cheat at all because I don't think, 94, Adelaide, Jerez 97, Monaco 2006, I think it was. 3 times in 15 years? Does that really make somebody a cheat? I think that's a ridiculous label to put it in. Was he dirty at times? Yes, he was. Of course he was. But you've got to be a hard racer, haven't you, Jonty? You can't. He was on the line a lot. He was right on that line between too far and just on the right side of it. But that's what makes a great racing driver, is it not? And call me a fanboy. I don't mind. But isn't that what makes a great racing driver? Being able to get to the line without taking it too far the majority of the time. Obviously, there are some instances where it went too far.
I think the biggest point that people seem to miss is that Michael Schumacher was very, very clever. He knew all of the rules and all of the regulations around the sport inside out. He knew that rule book from cover to cover. And because he was clever and knew so much and was always thinking, he would always be pushing to find those little loopholes. Now, yes, you can argue they were unsportsmanlike as opposed to actual cheating, but he was always the first one sort of trying these things out, which people would then notice and go, oh, hang on a minute, you probably shouldn't be doing that. And rules would be put in place afterwards. Examples, taking the stop go on the last lap. The parking at Raskas, things like that. There were other ones which were very dirty, as you said. 94 is still an argument. Jerez 97 is not an argument. It was quite clear.
Yeah.
And he got slammed for that one. He tried it, got caught. Probably because people were still thinking about Australia 94, thinking, oh, hang on a minute, he did try it before, so we'll have him this time. But the other ones, he's always just been trying to find that little extra that's not just being quick on the track.
I love Martin Brundle's commentary from Jerez 97 when he goes, "That didn't work, my friend. You hit the wrong bit of him." It's like you knew what he was doing that day. At the time he could do no wrong, but looking back, he did break the rules. I'm not going to label him a cheat. I'd be interested to know those in chat that are saying he is a cheat. If you'd label Senna a cheat, I'd wager you won't, because he only cheated a couple of times. But I mean 94. Yeah, I think I see that two ways. I think Damon Hill doesn't need to be making that move. Damon Hill himself has said, with hindsight, he didn't need to make that move. Schumacher had broken his car. His race was over anyway. So he was a bit hot-headed in that move, knowing that Michael Schumacher can be aggressive, so he doesn't need to do that. That doesn't mean it's Damon Hill's fault, but you know what I mean. 97, 100% his fault. You can't turn it. Yes, part of me would love to slap Jacques Villeneuve. Michael Schumacher went for it. But yeah, 100% his fault. 2006 Monaco was just completely ridiculous and unnecessary as well, Dan. 2006, he was in the title fight, and without making that move that he made, stopping at La Rascasse and compromising, I think it was Alonso's lap in the end, which gave him pole. Without doing that, he would have been further up the grid, could have picked up more points, and that could have been crucial at the end of the year. So we're not just dirty at that point, but a bit of a daft thing to do.
It's just such a shame in a way, because it's just, I suppose, coming from, a fan that didn't get to see a lot of Michael's races, it puts a stain on his record that doesn't need to be there. And like you say as well, we've seen people, I suppose, quote unquote, cheat. I don't like saying that either, although it's great to wind you up with. But I mean, Rosberg did it a couple of years ago in Monaco. You see Magnussen do all these even Verstappen fans do double moves all the time. So people are always pushing those boundaries. But I think because they were in championship fights, Michael's sort of legacy has these stains on them, which is a shame. Again, I don't want to comment too much because I didn't see the races live and there wasn't that tension for me. And I suppose I don't want to just go off of what people say, but it is a shame in a way. And like you say, it was unnecessary in certain cases, which makes it even more frustrating.
I think if you look at controversial moments in F1, most world champions, you could go, oh, they cheated. They did this or they did that. Not all. There's not all of them, but Schumacher, Prost, Senna, Alonso, you could possibly argue, but he didn't really win the world championship for cheating. You know what I mean? All the greats have done something, and that's, as Racing said in chat a couple of times to a few people. I'm sure it's Racing. I'm not going to find it now, because his chat's just scrolling, but basically saying that that's what makes a driver great. That is why they're multiple world champions, because they know where the line is and they push it. And as you said as well, Jonty, he knew the rules, he was smart. But we'll move away from that and focus on the big positives of his career. 7 world titles. That could be beaten. There is someone on the grid. Let's not talk about that. There is somebody on the grid that could match that or beat that, but that's a phenomenal record, isn't it, Jonty? 7 world titles, 91 wins. I mean, yeah, all right, he had the dominant car for a long time with Ferrari, but again, got himself in the right place at the right time, turned that team around, and after years of hard work, that hard work paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that people often forget is so many of those wins weren't just running out at the front in a dominant car. A good 20, 25 of those wins were really, really hard fought battles where he had to really work to get on that top step.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not all about Ferrari, is it? A big part of his career, but I suppose I don't really know what to say about him without just sitting here fanboying too much, to be honest, because people are going to see it that way. But I think even with a neutral head on, most people can accept and understand why he's seen as one of the greatest of all time. Just a phenomenal racing driver. But how will you remember him, Dan? I know he's still alive. I'm talking like he's gone, but as a racing driver, how will you remember him from what you saw of him on track?
It's a tricky one, obviously, because I didn't see him that much, and when I did see him, he wasn't at his best. So it's a difficult one, but I think he will be remembered as, I want to say, the greatest of all time. People, maybe he wasn't the best on the track, but the stats always count for something. And so I think I'll always remember that when I first became a Formula One fan, he is, well, I suppose the target is the best thing. He is the number one. So I think that's definitely how I'll remember him. What
about you, Jonty?
Yeah. It it goes to a point that you always make, is that you don't like to judge drivers who are still driving in the greatest of all time argument. And I think of those who can be included in it, who have finished their careers, he's definitely at the top. There are others that we can't put in, people like Clark, because they had their careers cut short. Senna, obviously. But of those that did, he's definitely at the top by a long way.
Yeah, when I do my greatest of all time lists, I like to know every single stat that a driver has, which is why current drivers weren't included when I did that over a year ago when I did that top 5 video. But I like to know their legacy, and he's got one hell of a legacy behind him. Pushing the negatives aside and pushing his on-track stuff aside. We've talked about the stats, but turning teams around, what he's done for the sport, and I think hopefully he'll be remembered for that. I know that there'll be a lot of people that remember him for the negatives only. I think that'll be the same with Lewis Hamilton when he retires. Genuinely, I think people won't there'll be people that refuse to acknowledge that he's a fantastic racing driver, probably best of his generation, and will just turn around and go, yeah, but this and yeah, but that. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at the end of the day. The stats speak for themselves. Michael Schumacher is an absolute superstar, a phenomenal driver, as I said a few times. Yes, I'm fanboying. No, I don't care. But let's take a few of your comments and questions from chat, so start popping them in there. I did see a question that scrolled a little bit earlier. A couple of people asking about Bottas. I'm not going to say anything on Bottas because on Tuesday you will get to hear me rant and moan about Valtteri Bottas. So there you go, a little sneak peek on what's coming next week. Back to opinions, Jonty. Yes, I'm going to be a dick.
I wouldn't expect anything else. No, just briefly on Schumacher. I mean, one of the things that always bugs me is that people go on about the stats and 91 wins. And for me, the problem there is that it doesn't make people aware of his greatest drive, in my opinion. That would be Spain 1994, where he went for more than half the race stuck in 5th gear. And it was such an incredible drive that no one actually believed him and wouldn't accept his word that he was stuck in 5th until they saw all the telemetry. That is the kind of insane skill that he had.
Yeah, absolutely. Just while looking for questions, Dan, Jeff Malone wants to know if you've got Grosjean's book yet.
I saw that comment and it made me sad that no, I still do not have his cookbook. I have got Kimi's haiku book, so that's something, I suppose. But no, the cookbook still hasn't arrived yet. But it's my birthday soon, so fingers crossed, maybe.
That's rude racing. I'll remember that. Necron says best looking year for F1 cars. I don't know about. I could have picked a year. I think 99 had some very nice looking cars. 98 as well. I that Black Arrows, Jonty. Oh, I love that car. That McLaren as well was stunning. Ferrari was nice. I've always preferred, and I know I'm in the minority with this, but I've always preferred those raised noses over the drooping ones, as I call them.
No, you see, I like the old school ground scraping front wing and nose. You see, I wouldn't call it a year. I'd say just a little period, 88 to 91. They were all, didn't really change all that much, and there were some stunning looking cars and liveries. The March Leighton House was just stunning.
I suppose from your point of view, Dan, anything Grosjean drove?
Well, I don't know. That 2009 Renault wasn't the best. So, I mean, part of me wants to say this year's, but I know that's going to be very controversial for the first stream with the Halo and everything. But I suppose the first few years I was watching Formula 1, 2007, 2008, the look of those cars, that was something special. Whether that's just more of a nostalgia thing, I don't really know. But I think a lot of the liveries these days I'm a big fan of. So, yeah, I'll take the newer generation of cars. I think they're something quite nice.
Yep. Tim C. Cambridge says, will Leclerc be the big surprise of this year? I'm going to say no, but hear me out, because I don't think it'll be a surprise. The way he's being hyped up and the way people are talking about him, I think everyone's expecting him to rock up in the early part of next season and be able to challenge Vettel, so I don't think it'll be a surprise. What I am going to say is I think there are two drivers, Lance Stroll and Pierre Gasly, who will surprise a lot of people. I don't expect Gasly to be thrashing Max Verstappen or anything stupid like that, and I don't think Lance Stroll will rock up and suddenly start knocking Perez for 6. I don't think that's, well, maybe they might, but as in terms of pace, I don't see them doing that, but I think people are already saying Gasly's going to be a long way off Verstappen and they'll be poor, and people are saying that Stroll's going to be nowhere, and I think they could surprise Dan. But what about Leclerc?
Yeah.
Do you think he'll be the surprise?
No, I sort of agree with you. I don't think it's going to be a surprise where he is. I think maybe, I suppose, more casual fans may be a little bit surprised that this almost rookie driver, I know it'll be in his second year, but this almost rookie driver is going to be so close to a 4 times world champion. So maybe on that side of things. But I think, like you, I'm looking to more of the stories in the midfield. And I think if I was going to put my money on anyone, I'm going to go Nico Hulkenberg, because I think a lot of people really don't see him as good as Daniel Ricciardo and think he's going to get absolutely slapped around. But I think Hulkenberg is a bit of a hidden gem in that midfield. So I think he's going to be my surprise of the year. And maybe George Russell as well. I've spoken about him quite a few times, but I think he could be special. So Hulkenberg, for me, is just the one that sticks out. And I think a lot of people are going to go, actually, this guy's got talent.
John T?
Yeah, I don't think there'll be any surprises with what he can do next year. Everyone's expecting a lot, and I think it will be more of a surprise if he doesn't deliver.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I've got some good questions coming in, so I'm going to try and fly through these. Umar on Car says, will Hamilton match Schumacher's wins or world titles record first? I mean, he might match neither. I think wins is probably more likely, John T. Obviously, 21 races this coming year, probably 22 plus or possibly 22 plus the following year, although if we're going on Jane Bear's predictions, hopefully 23. But yeah, 23 races, say, in 2020. So there's a great chance he can match the wins. I think 7 world titles all depends on what Ferrari do with Vettel or Leclerc, or if Red Bull are competitive with Honda, because obviously if you throw them in the mix, then winning the title is going to be a damn sight harder than it has been over the last few years. As in 2014 kind of time, not last year or this year. Or 27. I'm lost. What year are we in? 2019. You know what I mean.
No, you can't confuse me at the end then.
I was trying to defend what I said when I said, because obviously preparing for fanboys, when I said that it'd be easier. It won't be as easy as it has been in previous years, but I wasn't referring to 2018 and 17 because they were tough years.
Yeah, they were. He can definitely do it if he sticks around, which is the big talking point.
Yeah, we just don't know when he's going to retire, do we? I still think end of 2020, but then he's still talking about having the hunger for it. So, yeah, I don't know. We'll maybe talk about his retirement one day, but I think it's not many years off, but it might not be as soon as perhaps I've said in the past, but I still think 2020. I'm always going to say that. A lot of people seem to agree with you on Hulkenberg. Ben McCarthy says, favourite F1 title decider. Oh, I'll come to you first on that, Dan, because I need to think, mate. That's a tough one.
That is a tough one. Oh, you've thrown me under the bus here, letting me go first. But I mean, it's always great when there's multiple people, as in if there's 3 or maybe even 4 drivers, that's brilliant. But I think 2012, just mainly because Alonso in this dog of a car dragging it all season long. And in the final race, Vettel spinning on lap 1, you're thinking, oh my God, Alonso's going to do it. And Vettel, who a guy at the time I was definitely not a fan of, watching him come back through that race, a crazy race as it was, that was pretty special. But I still, that last lap on 2008, that might just edge it for me. Unfortunately, my turn to fanboy a little bit. But no, that was something special, and especially being my second, third year watching Formula One, that really was the sort of thing that made me think, wow, I really want to follow Formula One for the rest of my life. So yeah, I think I'm going to go 2008, but it's very close.
That's a good. I think recent times, I'd say 2008, 2012. What do you reckon, John T? I'm trying to think a bit further back.
Well, I can actually think of a few. 2010, because we had 4 drivers who could take it, and the one who did take it had never led the championship up to that point. You know, it doesn't get any closer than that, really. Further back,
98 was quite good. That finale in Japan, because you had Schumacher coming back, didn't you, after stalling on the grid? And maybe, again, this is me just being a bit fanboyish, but kind of getting excited because is he going to do it? He's closing in. Could he do it? And then bang, puncture. Just a lot of drama there. 99 was okay. It wasn't epic. I think Malaysia was better in 99. I think that was a bit more dramatic.
Yeah, going much further back, I mean, there's 54 was quite spectacular considering a driver, Peter Collins, gave up his car to Fangio so he could get his fourth title. I mean, we would never see anything like that happen now because of the way the cars are, but I mean, that's pretty spectacular. And then, of course, 76, 86, I mean, that was about as spectacular as it gets.
Yeah, I think anything Prost Senna was epic, and obviously Hunt and Lauda as well. That was a phenomenal year, not just title decider, but Lauda coming back, still injured, struggling, rain coming down, turns around and goes, "I'm not racing this. It's not worth the risk," and pulls in, and off goes Hunt with all that drama to fight back to take the title. So that was quite an epic one. Not alive for that one, but I've watched a lot on it. So. I could talk about title deciders all night. I might do that one day. Just sit down and have maybe a midweek stream at some point in the winter. Just talk about a bit of F1 history. Couple of quick ones. Jeff Malone, do you prefer the blue and yellow or black and yellow livery for Renault? Blue and yellow all day long, Jonty. I love that livery.
Yeah, absolutely. My missus hates it, but I prefer it. Yeah, absolutely hates it.
What about you, Dan? Do you prefer the blue and yellow Alonso Renault or the yellow and black one we've got now?
I like the blue and yellow, but classic liveries, I almost think I want them to stay classic liveries. I don't want to lose that special edge. So I prefer the blue and yellow, but I'd rather they keep that as a classic, like special livery, if you sort of get what I mean.
Yeah. I'm going to butcher your name, mate. Yosia? You're going to hate me for that. But he says, do you think Senna would have had more championships than Schumacher had Senna not crashed at San Marino? In a word, yes. To be honest, John T, I think he would have won 94, Senna. I've always said this. If Damon Hill, who, I'm sorry, Damon Hill fans, wasn't all that good of a driver, can get that close to the title, I think Senna would have just had too much for Schumacher and taken it.
Yeah, absolutely. He would have walked it. Assuming he could get to grips with the car, because he did. It's part of the whole thing that went towards it. His mind wasn't really in it because he'd struggled so much with issues in the first couple of races, but they were getting fixed. So it's a hard one to call.
Yeah, we could do what ifs all day long with F1, couldn't you? But I think 94 he would have won. You'd then argue if he'd stayed at Williams, he probably would have won 96. So that would have been 4-5 for Senna. If he'd stayed at Williams again, you could easily argue he'd have won 97, but would he have ended up at Ferrari by then?
I don't think he ever would have gone to Ferrari.
Do you not?
No.
Oh. I'll talk to you about that one later. I'm intrigued. That could be one for a video or stream. But yeah, he would have won more. I think he would have won more. Or at least been in contention for more, Dan. We can never guarantee, can we, that somebody would have won more because you never know what's going to happen. But he'd have been in contention for him.
I just want to say I really enjoyed listening to you two then. Really fanboying out. So I'll take your word for it, boys. Yeah, why not? He was a special driver, as we all know. And yeah, I think he could have snatched that most world titles. I really do.
I've got two more. One that I'm going to answer quickly. I'm going to answer one quickly on behalf of Eggy. And it comes from Lil Sabo. Says, do you guys think that the Valencia street track should return? No, disgusting track. But Jack Chambers, no, not Jack Chambers. Sorry, mate. I'm just giving you a shout out there. Hope you're well, mate. So the honour bar. Would Hulkenberg be a world champion if he was a few inches shorter? That is a fantastic question because had he been a few inches shorter, John T, he could well have been sat in that Ferrari.
Yeah, that is a great question. It's certainly possible. He doesn't flap under pressure as much as another German does. So, yeah. He definitely could have been in with a shout.
This is it, isn't it? He did. I'm sure he signed. Or there was a contract on the table. There was something there, wasn't there, with Ferrari, and that was where he was going, and that's why he made the move to Sauber when he did. Because that was, keeping him in the Ferrari family, if you like. So he was on his way there, but obviously regulations and whatnot shifted around and things were changing, and they decided to go with a shorter driver rather than a taller one. So that's a fantastic question. I mean, we like Hulkenberg, don't we? I think all three of us do, but me and Dan fanboy over him way too much. Massively underrated. But I think world champion, again, we can't guarantee that, but I think he'd have been a contender had he been just a few inches shorter. I love that question. We're umming and ahhing, we're not sure. What do you reckon, Dan?
It's a difficult one. It is. I know. I remember at the time when he was linked with Lotus as well, and thinking, "Oh my God, if we get this guy Lotus, who at the time were really putting in a championship fight with Raikkonen," I was thinking, "Yeah, he could do it." So, yeah, I think if he was in the right car, he definitely could. Like you say, we do fanboy over him, but he is a really solid driver. And I will say, if he can just stay with Renault for a few more years, they've got a really nice setup building up. So I think Ricciardo probably will evolve into that number one driver. But if he can just hang in there, there's still time. There is still time.
Yeah. I hope he gets a podium this year. I don't think he will. I didn't predict him to in that stream we did with Stuart on Thursday, but I've just got this horrible sinking feeling when it comes to Hulkenberg that he's just destined never to get one. It's awful. It's a horrible feeling, really, but and I think that'd be a travesty. Travesty is probably a strong word, but I think it'd be such a shame if he retired without ever standing on the podium because he is so underrated. He really is. But I think we're going to leave it there. Lads, we've gone over a little bit today, but we haven't streamed for 2 weeks, so we'll let that one slide. It's been a pleasure, as always, Dan, to sit and talk a bit of F1 with you. Fair bit to talk about, actually, considering it's the winter. And hopefully we're back very, very soon with more. But a pleasure as always, mate.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. And you know what? I think 2019 is going to be even better than 2018. It's been a brilliant first one for the year. Thanks for having me.
No worries, mate. And thank you as always, John T. It's good to be back for 2019 and not long till the season starts now. You feeling the hype?
I am feeling the hype because I've kind of hyped it up myself with my predictions.
And by the way, when I say season starts, I count the season starting for me from the first car launch.
Yeah, absolutely, because we get constant news from that point. That's when things really get going. So we're good. We're good. This is going to be a great year.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really looking forward to it. But thank you very much, lads, and I will talk to you probably in a bit.
Yeah, thanks a lot, mate. And see you, folks.
See you, everyone. Happy New Year.
Awesome stuff. Lovely. Thank you very much to John T and to Dan as always. It was a pleasure to be back. I don't think I can date how much I've missed streaming. It's only been 2 weeks, but I've got some bad news. There won't be a stream next Sunday. It's good news and bad news. It's bad news because there won't be a stream, but it's good news because there will be the Autosport show. So make sure you are following me over on social media. Loads that I'm going to try and bring to you over there. Pictures and updates, and maybe might be trying some streaming. Might get to meet Stuart there as well and some other YouTubers as well. So I'm going to try and get some stuff from there. And I will be using Instagram more. If you follow me over there in 2019, fingers crossed that's a promise I can keep to. So definitely follow me over there. But next week's schedule, there'll be a video up on Tuesday. There'll be a video on Thursday as well. Both of those will be 4 p.m. GMT. And then 11 a.m. on Saturday, there will be another video as well. That is the schedule going forward for the rest of the winter. Obviously, car launches will change that and testing as well, and it will change when we get to the season. But for the most part, that will be the baseline minimum upload schedule, and we will be live every Sunday at 6 p.m. Just not next week, unfortunately, because of Autosport. But you can follow me over on social media. Links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.